Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Dressage Instructors Network. Now, we're also going to be sharing the show with other pages, but this is coming to you live from the Dressage Instructors Network. We're so excited to see you here. We're lining up a whole series of shows that are designed especially to make a difference for what you're doing as a professional instructor, or, of course, those of you who are ride-ins. You're going to love what we have to share with you. Our shows are free, and we're going to give you the tools that'll make a difference in your riding level and in your horses. So first, let me introduce you to my co-host, and this is Laura Kelland-May.
Hi there, everybody. Thanks for joining us here tonight, this afternoon, this morning, whenever you're here.
And Laura's come to us from Canada. She's actually an Equestrian Canada senior judge, hunter, jumper, equitation, and hack, senior steward and competition specialist, and high performance trained. Laura's just come back from a certification program where she was working with dressage instructors, right, Laura?
Yeah, that's right. So last weekend, there's an excellent program here in Canada that certifies riding instructors. So we had two dressage instructors coaches who were being certified. I just took part in that. Yeah.
Those certifications.
I was evaluating.
Oh, cool. Well, let's introduce our first guest, and you've heard of her, Susan. Yes, it's the Susan E. Harris. She's a clinician. You've heard her from centered riding, anatomy and motion. So she's going to be sharing topics and training exercises that focus on the movement of horses and so much more. In fact, the topics that we're going to cover are anatomy and motion, how it will improve your horse's movement, the essential shoulder sling muscles, and how they can improve your horse's balance and collection, how it improves your horse's movement, how a horse moves, the circle of horses, that's a good one, the circle of muscles, I know, and how they make a difference, and improve the way your horse uses its back and relaxation stretching exercises to improve your horse's back. Now, with all of our shows, those of you who are live, please feel free to ask questions. Just put them in the comments, including the comments that are on the Facebook page, because we will see them directly here, or you can listen to the replay later. All right, Laura, did you want to play that video with Susan?
Yeah, so we're playing this video right now in the background. If Susan wants to talk over it right now.
Well, let me introduce her to everybody. So those of you who don't know, the few of you who don't know Susan, she's a renowned horse person. She's an artist, a riding instructor, an international clinician who conducts centered riding clinics and anatomy and motion demonstrations. She's the author and illustrator of Horse Gaits, Balance of Movement, Horsemanship in Pictures, Grooming to Win, and the U.S. Pony Club Manuals of Horsemanship, and more. Susan apprenticed with Sally Swift, the founder of Centered Riding, and she teaches clinics in centered riding and anatomy and motion. Would you like to say anything before we start our show today, Susan?
Well, thank you for having me. It's really nice to be here. I think what you see in the background is a part of the Visible Horse demo. This was a lovely big warm blood in the Netherlands quite a few years ago, and it was kind of nice that they caught him in slow motion, so you get to see the bones move. And anyway, today we're going to be talking a little bit about how understanding your horse's anatomy can help with your teaching and training.
It makes a huge difference. Now, this is she and Peggy, what was Peggy's last name?
Peggy Brown.
Peggy Brown developed, you've all seen it, the Invisible Horse series where they have the horses doing this type of thing. And as you know, once they started doing it, it's like everybody started copying it because it was a way for people to see, right, Susan? To see how horses actually move. And that's what we want.
I think we did the original way back for Equitana USA back in the 90s. And then we came out with a Visible Rider where Peggy Brown wears the bone suit or the skeleton suit and shows how the rider's body works. And we broke that one in Australia. And it's kind of taken us all over the world. Not this year. With COVID, we're both staying home.
Right. Well, it's revolutionized the way many people dressage. those of you who aren't dressage riders, like the hunter and jumper people that we're sharing this with, if any flat work that you're doing, it makes a difference if your horse is moving right, ladies?
Totally. And
I
think it's so neat the way you can see exactly where the bones are and how our riding affects the horse, for sure.
Yes.
Well,
all right,
I started doing this.
Go ahead, Susan. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say I started doing this because I'm a visual learner. I'm an artist, so of course I like things that I can see. And I think a lot of people learn better when they can see it. And it's really great if you can see it in motion. Unfortunately, we couldn't bring the visible horse into the studio today, but at least you got a nice slow motion video.
Oh, and we've got some of Susan's
a lot of illustrations.
Amazing illustrations. She creates all of the illustrations that we'll be sharing in the show today to help you see the difference. All right, let's start with anatomy and motion. How it will your horse's movement.
Yeah, this is old Satori. He is gone now. He lived to be 33 years old. He was an Arabian that Peggy Brown owned, and ex-endurance horse and pretty well put together. And he was a good horse to paint the skeleton on because he was, fairly well built. And he also stood still for it, which helped a lot. So you can see with the skeleton.
Sorry to interrupt you, but how long did it take you to put this on this horse?
I've gotten faster over the years. I think I have probably done, I'm guessing, upward of 500 horses over the years. So I've gotten faster, but I always allow 2.5 to 3 hours because it depends on how big the horse is. If there's yards and yards of him, it takes a lot more time and paint. And it also depends on whether they cooperate and hold still, because it's hard to paint a moving target.
Yeah.
And painting, I have to
find the spots. Seem to do this with your audience is packed with people watching this.
Yeah, well, I have to palpate and find the spots. And the first time we did this, I had a vet, a horse chiropractor, and an anatomist, and they were all palpating the horse like mad and saying, here is the tip of the third thoracic vertebrae. And I don't think I could have done it the first time without their help, but every time I do it, I learn something new. So we've taken a look at Satori's skeleton, and I don't think I'm going to try to go into the bones today, but it's always good to have a look at the skeleton and just sort of know that, like, the hind legs are levers and push the horse forward, and the front legs swing forward and reach out and support the horse's weight. And also that horses don't have collarbones like people. Our collarbones let us hang from the monkey bars and rotate our arms almost 360 degrees. Can you imagine if you came in to feed your horse and you found him swinging from the rafters waiting for his grain? I put that on YouTube.
They would probably love it.
You can't, because he doesn't have collarbones.
And that opposable thumb.
Yeah, no opposable thumb. Thank God, or my horse would be on the internet.
Yeah.
The other thing you might want to notice is that the neck bones don't run along the top of the neck, as a lot of people sort of think. They dip down and make a rather beautiful S curve, and the blue stripes that go down the center of Satori's back and then to each of the cervical or neck vertebrae, that is the neutral ligament, and the neutral ligament is really important in the horse's balance because it helps him balance his heavy head that's out on the end of a long, flexible neck and connects it to his back. And that means whatever goes on in his head and neck affects his back and vice versa.
So what's up here?
Where is here?
Oh, I'm drawing it on the diagram.
Oh, you're seeing that's his mane that's braided. If you're looking at the white spot, that is a braided mane to get it out of the way so that you can see the neutral ligament.
And so that ligament goes along the top like this, and the neck bones are kind of hanging from there?
That's right. It has two parts. It has something like a long strap that runs right along underneath that long white braided mane. And that connects to the dorsal ligament that runs right down the center of the back and connects all the tips of the vertebrae together. And then it has what's called the laminar part, and that is big wide webbing that goes down from the big strap-like funicular part down to each one of those cervical vertebrae. So you can see how it helps support it. And
Yep.
ligaments are really tough. They have a little give, but they don't stretch much. So when the horse lowers his head, then that ligament pulls over the top of his withers and helps lift his back. And that's one reason we want to
Okay.
ride a young horse in a longer frame and allow a young horse to lower his head, because that lets his ligaments help him out carrying a rider when his muscles aren't yet strong enough to carry a rider.
Cool. Very interesting.
Okay,
is.
shall we
Is there
take a look at the muscles?
Yes.
That's the next one. Oops.
So it looks like you paint one side of the horse with the skeleton and the near side of the horse with the muscles. Is that right?
That's right. And I
Yep.
always do it same side and same colors. It's a lot easier to be consistent. And as we go, I learn more. Sometimes I have to change how I draw a particular muscle as I learn a little more about it. A couple of years ago, I got to go to the whole horse dissection workshop. Oh my God, it was awesome. Sort of like going to vet school, except not the whole vet school, just the part I would like the most.
Yes.
And anyway, these are not all the muscles. These are the major muscles that move the horse, the major muscle groups. And one of the ones you want to look at first is there's a chain of muscle that's painted kind of rose pink, and it starts on the first cervical vertebrae up behind his ears, and it goes through the neck, and that binds all the neck bones together. It also makes small, deep movements of the neck, flexion, left, right, up, down, rotation, and it continues on this chain of muscle. It's many, many, many small muscles. And if you look at the actual muscles, it looks like many fibers almost braided together in a thick rope on each side of the horse's vertebrae. And we sit directly over that chain. And that chain goes from the tip of his tail between his pelvic bones, down the back, between the shoulder blades, and all the way to the first cervical vertebrae. So we've got a chain from the end of the tail to right behind the ears. And we have to remember we sit over that. And that helps connect whatever goes on in the horse's hind legs to his front end, and also whatever he does with his head to the rest of his body. So that chain's kind of an important one. It's a very, very deep muscle. And if you wanted, there are many names because there's a whole series of muscles, but probably the most common name is multifidus, and that just means many fibers. So we've got many, many fibers that we sit on. And then if you look at when a horse moves, he first has to pick up his hind leg because that's his pusher. So he uses the muscles that go down from the hip to the stifle, and those are painted blue. So if you look at the muscles on the front of the hindquarters, those guys, those are the ones. And then there's one painted purple. That's the quadriceps, like your big thigh muscles.
This one?
And it would be a little higher in front of the red muscle. That's the one. And all of those muscles bend his hind leg, swing it forward, and put it on the ground. Now they're helped out by very important deep, deep muscle that's painted turquoise that runs from underneath his loin to the floor of the pelvis. And that's up there behind the ribs. It's actually inside the ribs, and it's a diagonal muscle. That's the one. That's the psoas. And the psoas is the deepest muscle in the horse. You'd have to take off all the other muscles before you could find that one. But that is a very powerful tucker of the hindquarters, and it helps bring the hind. There's one part of it runs to each thigh bone, so it helps bring his hind legs under him. And it's also helped by the belly muscles that are painted green, and the belly muscles help tuck the hindquarters, flex the pelvis, and bring the whole hindquarter under the horse. So all those help the horse swing his hind leg forward, put it on the ground. Once it's on the ground, the big muscles over the hip that are painted pink up on top of the hip, those are the gluteals. Those are just like your glutes. And there's just like us, they have 3 layers of them. and the big hamstring muscles painted red and orange that go around the back. When those fire, those act against the ground, they straighten the leg, and they push the horse forward and often up as well. And you can see that those connect to the lower hind leg muscles, especially that gastrocnemius, that dark purple one that's right where your cursor is now, and the big Achilles tendon. And if you count the tendons, they go all the way to the bottom of the hoof. So when those fire, they send the horse forward and up. They're the pushers. And they're the ones that make a dressage horse fly in the extended trot and send a jumper up and over a huge oxer. And by the way, they're also the kicking muscles. So have some respect if you stand behind them.
Yes, that's for
And
sure.
then notice,
Susan, it's
yeah,
almost time to
that's
move on
our
to our
story.
next topic. Do you have any training exercises you want to share in this topic?
I think I'm going to wait on that.
All
But I
right.
want you to notice the back muscles, which are painted yellow, because those are the ones we sit on, and those can be, we want those to be healthy and happy and supple and working. And if a horse has poor muscle development in his back, or he does not use his back well, he simply cannot move well. So if you look at the long yellow muscle that runs all the way, it actually connects with the big hip muscle painted pink, the gluteals, runs on each side of the withers all the way down underneath the shoulder blade and wraps around the base of the neck.
Okay.
And that one's called longissimus, and it's the longest muscle in the horse.
Hmm.
And we sit directly on top of that muscle. So it's important to remember it's a moving muscle. It needs to move freely. And the belly muscles help this a lot, because if that back muscle really tightened up, you would get a hollow back and a high head and a very stiff horse. The
So
belly muscles lift
if you
the
talk
back.
about a horse that's losing its top line, that's this yellow longissimus muscle that you're talking about.
The longissimus is a real important muscle of the top line. So are the gluteals, and so are the muscles of the top of the neck. And
Up
those
here.
muscles all connect. You notice the muscles in the top of the neck connect into the muscles of the back. So we have a chain of muscle, and we'll look at the muscle chains in a minute. But there's a chain of muscle that runs along all the way from the hock, up over the hip, through the back, and all the way to the pole. And remember, we have it on each side, because the horse usually moves one hind leg, then the other hind leg, unless he's bucking. So we have,
Please,
if you
no.
ride bareback, you can really feel that big longissimus muscle stretch and ripple and move under your seat. And we want a horse to use it well. And
Great.
using his belly muscles will help him move, help him use his back muscles well.
We need to move on to the next topic, Susan. Are you ready? Okay.
Move on. Yep.
How a horse moves, the circle of muscles, and how they make a difference. Do we need to change slides?
Okay.
Yep.
Yep, we'll change slides. And here is Satori again. Second, I'm trying to fix mine up so I can see it too. There we go. And here he is in trot, and you can see the muscles. The muscles, there's no such thing as one muscle that just does all the work. They all have to work in concert, and they work in harmony. We don't want any muscle left out getting slack and sloppy, and we don't want any one muscle overworked, stressed, and becoming tight and tense, or maybe even just overdeveloped. We want them all to develop in harmony, and that's what keeps your horse sound and supple and happy in his work. Also makes him more comfortable to ride. So you can see the same muscles we talked about. And one of the muscles to notice is, you notice the big orange muscle that runs down the horse's side? It's a back side muscle, and that's the lateral oblique. If you were a bodybuilder, you'd call it your lats. And that runs directly under the rider's knee and the saddle and the girth. And that one connects the back to the front leg. There's an acupressure point right in the middle of that muscle. And if you grip really hard with your knees, that acupressure point tends to tell the horse, stop. So people who lose their balance, grab with their knees, or ride with a tight, grippy thigh often are inhibiting how the horse can move, and especially how well he can use his back, because you can see that muscle connects right into the big old longissimus muscle that we sit on top of.
Right here.
Now, that doesn't mean we want to ride with knees sticking out, but we want to ride with a soft contact between the thigh and the knee and the horse, not a hard grip.
Excellent.
Okay, let's let's go move on to the next one, which this is the circle of muscles. And the circle of muscles is a special group of, we call them postural muscles. And those muscles are sort of show how those work on how the horse carries himself. And those are really important for whatever we're doing. This horse might be a fairly advanced horse because he's stepping up under himself and he's carrying himself with a little higher carriage. If he was a green horse, he couldn't do that. But you can see a little more clearly the shapes of the muscles. And notice not all the muscles that I showed on old Satari are in there. This is a very specific group of muscles. And it's the upper neck muscles, the deep muscles of the neck, the back muscles, the hind quarter, the hamstrings, and the deep abdominal muscles, and also some of the muscles of the shoulder sling, which we'll take a look at later. And these muscles, some of them we can see, and a lot of them we can't. Like some of the back muscles and the deep shoulder muscles are covered up by other muscles. But it's important that the horse uses his circle of muscles well. And some of that is based on classical training. If you get a horse to engage his hind legs and reach forward and move in rhythm, and you do a good job of using the training scale, you develop those muscles better and better. But if you take shortcuts like seesawing hands and draw reins and forcing a horse into what looks like a good position, those muscles aren't necessarily engaged. It doesn't strengthen them, and you can wind up paying for it later when you ask the horse to do more advanced work.
So how are these circle of muscles connected? So these are they all connected? And this circle of muscles is just like the circle of life. You need balance in all of these. I'm pointing here because my screen is there. All of these. You need all of these to be developed evenly to have a balanced horse?
We need all of them to be engaged. Now, you can see they don't all touch each other, but they do work in harmony and connection. And you can see that there's almost a chain. Now, we're going to look at muscle chains that involve some of the superficial muscels, but these are pretty deep muscles.
So this green one that this green one you were talking about, where is the acupressure point. Now, how is that? Yeah. How do you exercise that one specifically?
That's one of the shoulder sling muscles. And I'm going to show you the shoulder sling in detail later. Perfect. And that one is a little hard to exercise because there is no gadget, there is no gear that will make a horse use his deep shoulder sling muscles. The only thing that will do it is good riding. So if you can get your horse to lift his withers and lift the base of his neck, you can pat yourself on the back while you're patting him on the neck because you are riding well. And if you are riding stiff or hollow or bouncing or rough, the horse is going to tighten up to the point where he can't use those deep muscles well. So good riding.
Do you have some training exercises to share with us? Because that's what the people are waiting for right now.
The one that helps the circle of muscles is rhythm and engaging the hind legs. Let's move on and take a look at, can we find the engagement of the hind legs? Is that the next one?
These are great illustrations.
There we are. All right, there's the engagement of the hind legs.
We see people that are competing who don't know these basics. And once you see it, it's so easy to see, but I'll let you explain more about it.
Yeah, once you see it, you can catch it on other horses.
Right away.
We have what they call the lumbar sacral joint, which is where the loin or lumbar spine joins the sacrum or the spine of the croup. And that's also where the pelvis is attached. And that can open as much as 30 degrees. And so in the gallop, you can see the horses flexing his loin and bringing his hindquarters well under him. A horse can, we call it engagement, when he opens the LS joint and brings his hindquarters under him, like the
What's
horse
the
in Piaffe.
LS joint? Is that lumbosacral?
Short for lumbosacral joint, sorry.
Okay.
But LS joint is faster to say. And you look at the buckskin horse who is making a turn on the hindquarters, maybe shying from something, or the horse in Piaffe, and you can see that those horses are tucking their hindquarters under, opening that LS joint, and shifting their weight back over the hindquarters with their hind legs bent. And that's what we call engagement. Now the black, not the whole horse, but the hind end up at the top, that horse is taking big, long strides with the hind leg, which is a good thing, but that's called reach. And reach and engagement aren't exactly the same thing. A horse can take big, reaching strides with his hind legs when he is, let's say, in a lengthened trot, or an endurance horse really covering ground, and he's not in collection and he's not tucking his hindquarters. But we do want to see a horse who can freely swing his hind legs forward and back, and we also want to see the ability to engage. Now, the chestnut rear end on the right, that's a problem. That horse is doing what we call out behind. You notice his hind leg doesn't come very far under him, but it swings farther out and back than it swings under. And that almost always goes with a rigid, if not an actually sore back. And if you look up on the top of his top line, you can see that he has very little muscle. So we see an arch and a dip and a peak and another dip. And that is a sign of a horse with transmission trouble. So if we see a horse going out behind, that goes with a hollow dropped back. And that is trouble coming. If you let a horse travel out behind very long, he's going to have a sore back.
And is that something that can be fixed with proper riding?
First, we have to find out what's causing it. If, for instance, this horse had a sore hind leg, maybe he is hatching arthritis in his hock joint, then we'll have to deal with that through veterinary work. If he has a saddle that doesn't fit, or a rider who's out of balance, or maybe he's just very, very weak in the back and he's having a struggle carrying the rider, all those things can cause him to hollow the back. And a hollow back can cause a horse to travel out behind. Traveling out behind will cause a hollow back. So you have to do a little detective work to say, okay, what's the reason for the problem? And we have to fix the problem first. And often getting up off the horse's back, riding in a light seat, that means a seat that is slightly forward but still touching the saddle, or even getting up in 2-point and allowing him to swing his back more freely will sometimes help get the horse to reach under his body. But think of out behind as a red flag. That's a real danger signal.
So we do have a comment here from Kenda. Thank you, Kenda, for your lovely comments. Kenda says, seen a lot in gaited horses falling out behind.
Yes, and in the gaited horses, they have an extra problem in that many gaited horses are very prone to pace, especially if they get a hollow back. So if you see a gaited horse who's going out behind, almost always, if he isn't pacing, he's on the edge of pacing, and usually they will be pacing. And pacing, even a stepping pace, goes with a hollow, stiff back. So getting up off that horse's back and getting him to work through his back can really improve his movement, including a gaited horse.
Interesting.
So shall we take a look at, let's see, what do we have next? We have the shoulder sling muscles. That was the one you wanted to see. So let's take a look at our shoulder sling.
There we go. Now, if anybody who's watching, if you have any comments, Kenda did put a comment in. Thank you so much. If you do have a comment or question about what we're covering, we'd love to hear your comments and questions. And that's why we're here today, is to help share this information with you. And if you do have specific questions that we can help you with, we'd love to hear what you have to say. So feel free to put it in the comments.
And that's where we learn. We learn a lot, even.
Yes,
people that
I'm learning a lot.
Share their thoughts and their comments is the way, because usually if you have a question, somebody else does, and they might be afraid to ask it. So please interact with us. Let you know what you're seeing, what you're thinking, what you want to know more about. This is your opportunity to personally talk to Susan E. Harris. All right, continue, Susan. I know it's exciting.
I want to say that I think it's really important that you understand the practical side of anatomy. You don't have to learn all the Latin names of the bones and muscles unless you're especially interested in anatomy. But it really helps to learn some of these things about, for instance, that a horse has a lumbosacral joint and how it affects his movement, or that a horse has a shoulder sling and what that does for him. And if you have any trouble understanding this, I hope you'll ask questions, because it can be a complicated topic. But once you understand it, just on a simple basis, it can really make a difference in what you see in your horses and where you go with your training.
So yeah, really important. So I think we should start off by explaining what is a shoulder sling.
Okay, this is a specific group of muscles, and the first thing they do is they hold your horse's front legs on. Remember we said he doesn't have any collarbones?
Yes.
We humans have collarbones that make a bone-to-bone connection between our shoulder girdle, collarbones, arms, shoulder blades, and your skeleton. Horses don't have that. So these muscles connect the legs, and we'd have to take off a lot of the outer muscles to have a look at them. The shoulder sling muscles are the big green one that looks like a lot of leaves. And
these guys.
That's the back part.
I forgot to unplug my phone, sorry.
Right? That's the back part.
You said you didn't want that to happen.
I thought I had it turned off. I am going to.
Oh, well, that happens.
There, I just unplugged the other part of it. Sorry about that. Anyway, if you look at the big bright green part, that is only the back part. It's called the ventral part. And it's called serratus because if you look at the edges of it, it looks a little bit like a serrated bread knife. And that attaches to the inside of the shoulder and to the ribs. And then the front part looks like little green straps.
Yeah.
And that goes from the inside of the shoulder to the base of the neck vertebrae. So can you see how that helps hang the rib cage and the heart and the lungs and even the rider between the horse's shoulder blades and his front legs? Now, there's another one that's sort of a light turquoise, and that goes all the way from his poll back to the top of the shoulder blade. That one is called rhomboid, and that one tells you if your horse has been stretching through his back and using his back and neck well. Horses that don't use their back and neck well, maybe that carry their neck kind of high and arched, but their back is hollow, sometimes develop what we call a hatchet neck. They get a big arch. Sometimes there's a lot of fat in it, especially if it's a stallion. And then it looks like somebody hit him with a hatchet right in front of the withers.
Oh, yes. Right here, they have a little dip.
Very well. That's right. So if a hatchet neck means there's a big arch, it doesn't mean the horse is skinny. But if you see a horse with a great big arch in front, and then it looks like somebody hit him with a hatchet in front of the withers, that tells you that the rhomboids are not developed. He hasn't been connecting well from his back muscles all the way through his neck muscles. And those rhomboids are part of what support his rib cage.
Well, so you say how they're not connecting properly. Well, how do you go about getting those connected?
Some of it is you have to encourage your horse to reach forward through his back. When he uses a big step with his hind leg, we want him to use his belly muscles, lift his body, and stretch through his back. And the better he stretches, the more he uses both his long back muscle and his rhomboids and all the other muscles.
I'd like to add something here too that's an important part of this, and that's the feel. So when a rider is feeling the horse make the shift into where they're lifting their shoulders out of their withers, you'll actually feel your seat. Your riders will feel that their thighs start spreading a little bit more. And that's a result is what Susan was saying. The horses start expanding their rib cages, lift their front end up. And that's true with any style of ride. Well, basically anybody that rides in balance.
You are so right. And it's one of there's two signs that your horse is just using his shoulder sling. And remember, he's not going to use it and grip and hold on really tight. He's going to use it, release, use it, release, use it, release, and it'll get stronger as he goes. But it raises the base of his neck. See the red arrow at the bottom that sort of says the base of the neck goes up?
Mm-hmm.
And it also raises his wither. And if you're riding, and let's say you do a good half halt, and you feel for a moment, gee, he felt taller. Great, you got it. And if at the same time he feels a little wider between your thighs and knees, then he really used his shoulder sling. Tell him attaboy and tell yourself attagirl, because you just did a good piece of riding.
Also, remember, at first, when a horse is learning this, they have to build up the strength and stamina. It's like us sitting up straight, which we have to work on all the time, but we're conscious about it. But we're asking horses to rebalance. They might only be able to at first do a couple steps. And as Susan says, good job, good job. That's a miracle. You make sure you praise the horse a lot, and then you give them a rest break, come back and try it again so they can slowly build up their stamina until it becomes a habit.
Now, have you ever heard of a horse who actually grew taller after he was mature and his long bones had to have stopped growing? We know their long bones, all their long bones have stopped growing long before the age of 7. 7 is when the last growth takes place, and that's not even in the leg bones. And yet, sometimes a horse will measure an inch or 2 inches taller at the withers, and that's because he's developed his shoulder sling, strengthened it, and those muscles have gotten stronger and thicker and are now carrying his withers higher than they used to. That's a really good sign.
Susan, we have a question for you.
This is from Nancy. Friend has a horse with sticky stifles. She has been advised that conditioning will help. What sort of exercises helps with the sticky stifles? Thank you, Nancy, for the question.
Okay. Sticky stifles, I'm not sure exactly. And you always check this out with your vet, because I'm not a vet and I can't prescribe. But I would say what you want to do is strengthen your horse's quads. If you had a unstable knee joint, your physical therapist or your orthopedist might send you to the gym and say, I want you to go on a machine and strengthen your quads. And
Show us where the quads are again.
They're way down there on the lower thigh, and they're purple. And it's sort of a bulging, a little right farther here. Up. That's it. That purple bulge is the quads.
So this is the stifle joint, right?
Go from hip to stifle. That's the stifle
joint.
And we want to strengthen the muscles on the front of the stifle joint. And it doesn't hurt to strengthen the back ones either, because those stabilize the stifle joint. So if your horse has a little bit of wobbly stifle, and maybe sometimes his stifle gets slightly stuck, that can be because those muscles are a little bit weak and undeveloped. So the things that will develop
what are the exercises exactly?
You want to know what the exercises are.
Long strides in the walk. Also developing transitions, but you have to, and you're going to have to be a good physical therapist so that you do enough work that it stimulates the muscles to develop and strengthen, but not so much work that it stresses his weak stifles and makes him sore. So you have to use good judgment here. And if he's really sore the next day, give him a day off and go a little easier the next time. But if you find that he's improving, you've got it just about right. And it's always good to check this with the vet. When the horse is a little stronger, doing cavaletti and work uphill will help.
I agree.
But don't start out with work uphill with a horse with weak stifles. You need to do big strides in the walk, transitions from walk to trot and trot to walk, and then cavaletti with the grills flat on the ground at first, and then build up to raise cavaletti, and eventually start working up and downhill, but especially uphill.
Excellent.
But you have to build really good. To that, like a physical therapist.
If I could add something here too, while you're doing your transitions, as you heard Susan was describing the shoulder sling, really pay attention if you're working with your student or yourself that when you do the transitions, you feel the horse lift you up in the front. As I said, you're going to feel your thighs, your riders will begin to expand. You will feel the horse starting to shift back. And that's when you know they're using the correct muscles. But again, it takes time and building up.
Yeah, so you have to start out with small increments and develop those muscles first before you start going. Because I was going to go straight to walking over cavaletti, that type of thing. But like
walking over ground poles, but not raised cavaletti. The first
so walking over ground poles and hill work. That's the kind of thing that came to my mind at first. But you have to start with the gradual process first.
And it depends on where your horse is. If your horse is pretty good and he only has a few sticky moments, check it out with your vet. Or if you have a horse body worker like a chiropractor who helps you with him, or a massage therapist, check it out with them and say, where do you see him? What do you think is safe for me to do with him now? I see someone's asked, do you feel that in-hand work can be instrumental in retraining muscles that are constricted and restricting proper movement before you get on and try exercises they aren't ready for? I absolutely agree. But you have to do good in-hand work. So if you can do in-hand work with no weight on the horse's back, that's a great way to get your horse's muscles loosened up, warmed up. And just as you would when you're riding, you don't start out and say, okay, come out here and show me your best shoulder in. Ask him to do a little walking, stretching, moving in circles, moving sideways, and then build to a shoulder in rather than starting out with the hardest thing. But in-hand work can be wonderful. Okay, here's our muscle change. Shall we take a look at those?
So this is the next slide after the shoulder sling muscles, right?
That's right.
It kind of builds on this. This is the part of that sling, I guess, to help develop your horse's back.
The sling is inside. This is really muscle chains, and we say these muscles are not actually connected to each other, but they touch each other. And muscles are bound by and connected by fascia. Fascia is the stuff. If you eat meat and you get that shiny skin that's very, very tough, that's fascia. And fascia binds up the muscle bundles. And fascia is so strong that some muscles actually attach to fascia. Problem is, fascia can get really tight and stiff. And fascia all the sheets of fascia should just stretch and flow over each other easily, like they had oil in between them. And if they get stuck, that can create a stiffness or reluctance to bend, or it hurts if you ask a horse to do too much. So these muscle chains are made of specific muscles and fascia. And if you look at let's look at the top one first. The upper muscle chain, we already talked about a little bit, but here you can sort of see it in color, or different colors. And that one runs from, if you count the tendons, all the way from the bottom of the hind foot, around the back of the hindquarters, over the hip, through the back to the base of the neck, and then through the top neck muscles to the pole. And we sit right on top of that upper muscle chain. So we want the horse to have a strong, well-developed upper muscle chain, and we want him to feel free to move it.
Well,
sometimes one of the things we see.
Can you share some of your exercises with us for this?
Stretching helps develop the upper muscle chain. Anything that rounds the back, going over cavaletti, as long as your horse does cavaletti with a round back, we're going to come back to the stretching in a minute, but stretching will really help that.
This illustration is
now, if you look at the lower muscle chain, we can't leave that out because you can't use one without the other. The lower muscle chain starts with the tongue. And the tongue goes all the way back to the hyoid bone in between their jaws, skinny little bone that you can't see from the outside. And then there are muscles that attach to the back of the hyoid. They run down the front of the throat to the breastbone and also to the inside of the foreleg. And there's one of the muscles that's sort of yellowish, and it starts on the inside of the shoulder blade, drops underneath the front leg, on the inside of the front leg, alongside the ribs, and ends on the horse's girth area. And that connects to the belly muscles, which take it all the way to the power plant, to the hind end. So can you see when you put those together, how those two chains work? Now, one of the things you get with the under muscle chain is if the horse will stretch down He doesn't have to stretch way down, but if he will stretch out and down and gently chew the bit, that tells you he's activated all the muscles in his under muscle chain in a good, working, but relaxed way, not tight and tense. And that's what we want. So if your horse will reach down and chew, that's a really good sign. And he doesn't have to just reach down. He uses that chain even when he's in a very collected attitude like Piaffe. But we start with rhythm, working relaxation, and then we gradually develop it. I see Kenda's got a question here.
Yeah, so Kenda, again, another excellent question. Thank you, Kenda. When you're asking the horse to lengthen and reach, how low do you feel is too low for the head to go? How low can you go? Is there such a thing as too low?
It's changed a lot.
Let's look at our stretching down horse for a second.
Okay.
The next one, I think.
I love this photograph because for years, even in the dressage world, the stretches they were doing, the horses were basically hollowing their back by bringing their heads so low they couldn't keep their shoulders up. Remember that,
Well,
Susan?
the thing about stretching down is that it has to be a working stretch. A good friend of mine who trains Grand Prix says even a hollow-backed horse can graze. So if your horse is grazing, he's not stretching. He's just, or if he's leaning, he's not stretching. So one of the things that's really important to a good stretch is he keeps those hind legs reaching up under his body. If he's doing that, he's using his circle of muscles, he's using his belly muscles, his back comes up. And in that case, I'm not going to really say his head can go too low. It's just that I don't want him to live down there. If he wants to stretch his nose to his toes momentarily, I'd let him. But
so long as they keep the hind end
with his nose on his toes. As long as they keep the hind end reaching and active.
Yeah, that's they've got to be connected from the hind leg up into the rein. So what some people will do when they're stretching is they drop the connection from the front instead of keeping the horse stepping up into an alive rein.
I made that mistake many, many years ago when I was first learning about stretching. I had a high-headed, hollow-backed Appaloosa, and I taught him to drop his head down when I loosened the reins. He thought that was cool. And then when I tried to ask him to stretch correctly, taking the contact and chewing the reins out of the rider's hands, as the Germans say, he got really surly. He said, "You're breaking the rules." And it took me a long time to teach him to do it right. So do it right the first time. Don't drop the reins to them when they stretch. Now, this is forward and out. Let's look at forward and out because that actually comes for a lot of riders and horses. That one might come before you get great stretches.
And you can use
it's a good
road to stretch your riders. As soon as you see them, go ahead and see if they're really doing this kind of a stretch, right, Susan?
Yes. Now, forward and out is a foundation exercise. It's so important. If you can do forward and out, you have the foundation for proper, really correct bending, stretching, using the back, aligning the horse and getting rid of crookedness. You have a foundation for strengthening the weaker hind leg and evening up horses that are congenitally crooked. And all horses are crooked to some extent. And it's the foundation for shoulder in and for all the lateral work. But if you can't get forward and out, you can't get a decent shoulder in. So forward and out is kindergarten for all of this. And if you look at the one on the left here, the of riders from above, I usually teach forward and out from a halt. And I want the riders to have semi-loose reins. I don't want the rider on contact. I don't want him leading the horse with his reins because I want to isolate the aid and have the horse just pay attention to the inside leg. Now, if you squeezed both legs together, what should your horse do? Go forward. Yeah. What if you squeezed just your left leg and your right leg stayed passive like a pillow? But not just sideways, because the leg always says go forward. It's forward and out. And forward is just as important as out. Out is just as important as forward. So the perfect response would be if I give him a squeeze or a nudge with my left leg in the normal place near the girth,
Right
he
here.
should take a step, and as he does it, he should drift his ribs out and just move a little bit out on the first step. And the first step is the only one we care about. Now, that's hard for a lot of horses to understand, but if you practice it and you don't mess with his mouth, eventually, when he learns, oh, inside leg means step forward and drift my ribs out, then you can do it in the walk. And in the walk, it means step bigger and out. Start with a lazy walk where his hind legs aren't doing much. You find the time when the ribs swing out. And as the ribs swing out, that's when his inside hind leg is leaving the ground and swinging through the air and can reach farther. And that's when you nudge him or squeeze him with your inside leg. And if he already knows that means forward and out, he'll take a bigger step with the inside hind leg, and he'll also shift his ribs a little to the outside. And hey presto, you're bending. Now the other thing you get with forward and out is as you squeeze him, when you get a good response, can we look at the one from the top again?
Yep.
His body curves a little bit on the inside. That inside hind leg reaches farther. His outside stretches because he's shifting his ribs out a little bit. And you have a bend. He also will reach out and take a feel of your outside rein. You are going from inside leg to outside rein, even on a green horse.
Yay!
But you have to receive that, not get aggressive with it. And you don't fiddle with his head trying to get his head to the inside and make him do it this way. He's got to find it from your leg.
That's a great exercise.
In the trot, this is where it really pays off. In the posting trot, this is hard for riders. It's like trying to pat your stomach and rub your head at the same time. You have to, if you're posting on the correct diagonal with the outside fore and inside hind, you need to rise up. You need to use your leg as you rise. That means as your seat leaves the saddle, you use a little leg, and as you sit down, you relax it. And that catches that inside hind leg when it's swinging and asks him for a bigger stretch, bigger swing. So you're teaching him that inside hind leg, or your inside leg talks to his inside hind. Your outside leg talks to his other hind. But if you can get forward and out into the bit, you'll find he not only puts a little curve in his body, he begins to lift and stretch, and you'll feel his pole go forward. And if he offers a stretch, take him up on it. If he wants to put his nose to his toes, great.
What about for those explosive horses who kind of run away from your leg?
They need to do forward and out at a walk until they understand that leg does not always mean go as fast as you can. And that's a good way to teach them that leg can mean other things. You may have to be very tactful, very gentle in how you use your leg. You just maybe give it a gentle rub, not a pinch or a squeeze, and definitely not a spur.
Or maybe even stay at this stage for a bit.
Yeah,
or
maybe
maybe
do it in the walk until you get good results in the walk, and then you can do it in trot.
That's right, and good things take time.
Yep.
Yes.
And every time you get a good one, tell him attaboy.
Yep.
So the results you get are more swing and bigger reach of the inside hind leg, shifting the ribs, and a horse cannot lean in when he is shifting outward. So that's going to help his lateral balance. He's using his abdominal muscles to engage and lift the back, and he's starting to find that he can lift his back and it feels good. And the rider's responsibility is to first time it correctly so he can answer you, and also be sure that you're in balance and your seat is soft and comfortable and your hands are softly waiting for him to reach out and touch you so that it's nice for him when he does the right thing.
Okay, before we go on to the next exercise, I just want to read some of the comments here, if that's all right. Rose says,
shared your comments with us. We really appreciate that.
This is from Rose. Thank you so much, Rose. This is great stuff. Thank you. It's hard to get caught up with too many details and forget these basics. Yes, and we do need to sit up and take notice of the basics as the foundation for our riding. Kaylin, thank you. I'm very excited about all this awesome info. As a body worker and rider, this is fascinating. Yes, thank you, Kaylin, so much. Appreciate it. Kenda says, as a cowboy dressage clinician, I find this to be perfect match to school the riders and handlers. Susan has done such a beautiful job with diagrams and explanations. Thank you. Yes, Susan, these diagrams are amazing. Everything is very clear, and you've explained them so well.
This sounds like a commercial, but I will say, and it's not, because it's free. If you want to go to my Facebook page at Susan E. Harris Clinician, you can find an article on forward and out with these same illustrations, and articles on various other things that are they're basically writing lessons online.
So
and
that is
about
Susan E. Harris. Yeah, we've put that in the comments. You should be able to just click on it. Susan E. Harris.
Yeah. If you look for Susan Harris, you won't find me. You'll find the lady who does soap operas.
Oh, okay.
Susan E. Harris, clinician.
Anne Marie says,
we can get in one more exercise.
Yeah, Anne Marie says, what such great information. Thank you for sharing. Yes, thank you so much. And then we have here, Tracy says, I just learned this on my horse this past weekend, and it's so important. Fixes many holes. What a wonderful session. Thanks. Thank you all so much for your lovely comments. We really appreciate it. So I'm going to go, we're going to go to the next exercise.
Okay, and this may have to be the last one for today, but I've got two contrasting exercises. Let's look at the one at the top.
Okay. And I'm going to put in the comments, I'm going to put the link to your Facebook page so that people can click right on it. Okay.
And you can read the articles and you can see some of the diagrams there.
And she's got a lot of great articles that she writes. She calls them online lessons, and they're filled with so much information. You're not going to believe it until you see them.
Okay, well, spiraling out is a further extension of forward and out. When your horse knows forward and out, you can start on a medium circle, not a tiny circle. You know, more than 10 meters. I'm going to say maybe 15 meters, depending on the level of your horse. And as you do forward and out, you ask him to go forward a step, out a step, forward a step, out a step, so that he's making the circle bigger. And it is important to go forward because a lot of horses think, oh, I could just bend my neck at the shoulder, pop my shoulder, and run out through my outside shoulder. That's also called fall to the wall. And that is not what we want him to learn. So if you go forward a step, out a step, forward a step, out a step, that's okay if you have to take 2 or 3 steps before you do another out. But this is giving you practice at forward and out, from a medium circle to a wider circle. But always go forward on the new circle, just enough to make sure that he's following the track of the circle and he's not staggering sideways. And your outside rein is what says
forward, forward, out, forward, out, forward, out, forward,
forward, out,
forward, out.
This is actually a preparation for shoulder in, because if you think of shoulder in, if we're doing a right shoulder in, the horse is bent to the right, but he's moving to the left away from his bend. So if you practice forward and out on the circle, this is not the same as a leg yield, because in a leg yield, your horse is straight. He has only a little bit of flexion at the pole. In this, your horse is bent, and he's moving forward off your inside leg at the girth. And this prepares him for shoulder in. In fact, I had a lady who just learned it yesterday in a lesson, and she wound up riding shoulder in on the circle because she did such good forward and out. All we had to do was adjust the angle, and boom, she had forward shoulder in on the circle. That isn't going to happen to everybody, but that's a good start. Now, to compare it, a lot of people go, oh, spiral in, now spiral out. Spiral out, now spiral in. Spiral in down below, that is harder, because that one, the horse has to move into his bend. He's bent right, but he has to move to the right. And that is actually a more advanced movement. It's a preparation for half pass. So not all horses that can spiral out are going to be ready to spiral in very well. You can just sort of ride a diminishing circle, no problem. But if you're asking your horse to go sideways into his bend, he's going to have to be much more balanced and collected and organized in order to do it. So I would say save that for the more advanced horse who's about ready to start, haunches in and half pass.
This is different than your shoulder in or changing the flexion to the left on this one and doing a leg yield into a smaller circle.
Yeah, the leg yield into a smaller circle is really because the horse is stepping into the bend. He's bent right and he's stepping right. That is much more demanding and it requires more collection than shoulder in or spiraling out. So spiraling out is easy. Just riding a diminishing circle is okay. That's easy too. But stepping sideways and in is much more advanced, and that is really preparation for half pass. So if you're riding a green horse who should not even be thinking about half pass for a while, don't ask him to spiral in sideways. Just ask him to ride a diminishing circle, and then you can spiral out.
So if you are riding this, how can you tell if you are spiraling into a smaller circle or getting your horse to cross?
All I'm going to do, if I have a green horse and I don't want to ask him to do half pass preparation, I will just ride a pinwheel. I'm going to start on the outside and I'm just going to ride a little pinwheel that goes in farther and farther and farther. So he's just going forward on the circle a little smaller each time, and I'm not asking him to go sideways. But if you asked him to go sideways while he's bent, that's basically half pass, or it's preparation for half pass.
And a difficult exercise, and
Yeah.
maybe
So
something that a young horse wouldn't be strong enough to do.
Right. A lot of people think, oh, I can spiral out. Well, now let's spiral in. And I'm just adding a word of caution here that spiraling in sideways, the way we spiral out, is much more difficult, and it's asking a lot more of the horse. So ask it when the horse is ready for it. And if he's not ready for it yet, just find that small circle and spiral out until he's really good at it in both directions.
Well, I think we're going to have you back again, Susan, because we've run out of time here.
Yep.
Yes, in fact,
I have to talk about shoulder in, but this is all preparation for shoulder in. And if we can't get these things, shoulder in is going to be a disaster.
Right. And in fact, positioning your horse, because as we know, the horse's shoulders are narrower than the back end, and the shoulders have to be positioned more to the, if you're on a track, to the inside, just so they're tracking with their left hind legs, their left legs, for example, on the same track.
Mm-hmm.
And
this is once the horse is accepting contact. Yeah, once the horse is accepting contact, and you can ride him on contact, and you can ride him from inside rein or inside leg to outside rein, then you can say, no, I want to ride you in a little bit of position right when we're going to the right, little position left when we're going to the left, and that helps straighten him. But if he is greener than that, I think you need to do forward and out until you get him from inside leg to outside rein clearly and easily, and he's doing it with no problem.
At all the gaits.
That's my opinion.
Yep. Well, so Susan will be back with us in November. We're going to have her back. And what are we going to talk about? Oh, centered riding, how it affects what your flat seat position or your dressage seat. So we'll be going really deep into how to improve your rider's positions. We have another guest that's coming up, and that is, oh, now I can't remember it. Anyway, musical freestyles is Leslie. I had it up and that other thing. Leslie Goldman. She has musical freestyles with Leslie, and she's going to be doing a show with us on everything you need to know to improve your rider's position in the musical freestyles.
Excellent.
And more programs. We have so many great programs coming up, and we're so thankful that you could join with us today and share some of your topics and information with us, Susan. Thank you so much for your time. I'd also like to thank Laura, my co-host.
Thank you.
She's the one that does all the amazing background work and gets everything in line and stuff. I couldn't do this without her. I've learned.
Thank you.
So we'll continue sharing more of these shows, maybe 2 a month, where we'll be doing the Dressage Instructor Network's live shows. And we hope to see you there. Let us know what other topics you'd like us to cover, or what other people that we can invite to be guests.
Yes, and I'd like to thank everybody who commented today. Kenda here, Leslie, she also commented. Really appreciate your comments and your questions. It makes it so much. And Tracy, thank you so much. And Rose, I think you also put a comment in there. Kenda, Tracy, Anne Marie, thank you. Nancy, also. Kenda, Kaylin, Rose, thank you all so much for all your lovely comments. Really appreciate it. Makes things interesting.
Yes. And
Perfect.
we're doing it for you. So we look
Thank
forward
you so
to
much
seeing
for
you
having
on the
me.
next
I really enjoyed it.
Yep, we did too. All right, thank you, everybody. Stay tuned, and we'll be sharing when our next shows are and when they're coming up so that you can join with us and join in the conversation. Do you want to say anything to end this, Susan?
Well, just that the next time we're going to be talking a little bit about centered riding, and I will have lots of diagrams of what's underneath the rider, what's underneath the rider's muscles. So we'll talk about the rider's skeleton and anatomy and how we get that to work, hopefully as well as the horses.
Excellent. How about you, Randy?
What was the question?
Do you have any final words?
Oh, yes. Go out and try these exercises and see how they work with you. If you have more questions or if you need more, please come back to where you found this comment or this show and add a comment, because we're still there. Susan will still be answering your questions and that type of thing. So we are here for you to make a difference. Together we make a difference for each other. So we look forward to seeing you the next time. Go ahead, Laura.
Now go use this stuff. Go hug your horse. Thank you. See ya.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you all.